hello McDonald Middle School Class of 2026. This is Mrs. Kilday. Welcome to Thursday the 28th. Hopefully this week you've already had an opportunity to learn a little bit about decomposers and the brown food chain and why they're important as part of our environment and ecosystem. Today we're going to move into looking at how is it that biologists learn a little bit more about the animals that are consumed in an ecosystem. Now typically to do this lesson we would do a owl pellet dissection. Obviously since we are not in school we're not able to do that in real life, but we will be able to complete one virtually. Today I'm going to actually have you view two different videos. So in the first one I'm going to go over the virtual owl pellet, talk about what is an owl pellet, how are they collected, what do they tell us, and then I'm going to have you go ahead and go in and do a virtual dissection or pulling apart of a pellet. Now after that, I'm going to ask you to come back and watch the second video, because what I'm going to do for part 2 of today's lesson is take a look at how is it that we can actually figure out the amount of energy that comes from different organisms that are consumed by the owl pellet. We'll look at a food web that the owl is part of, different organisms that it consumes, and then how is it that it gets energy. The exit ticket question for today is going to be based on that second video, so please be sure that after you do your owl pellet dissection, that you're coming back and watching that second video before you move on to the exit ticket. So, before I bring over the what is the owl pellet, you're going to notice right here it says virtual owl pellet. When you click that, you are going to be brought to a general site, and you're going to have some options, and one of the first options will be information about the owl pellet, and then there'll be the dissection. So I'm going to start with the information part just because it does tell us a little bit about what a pellet is. So what is a pellet? Well, bird pellets are the undigestible remains of the bird's diet. Owls, like many birds, have to eat their food as whole, and since they don't have teeth, they cannot rip and tear it apart. Instead, they use strong beaks to tear it, but then they swallow those large parts. The owl then slowly digests the meat, tissues, soft parts of their prey, and then the harder materials, such as the bone, are not able to be digested by the owl. So they keep the important nutrients that it needs from the tissue and the meat, but then essentially it vomits the harder materials like bones, feathers, fur out. That vomited piece, that or regurgitated piece, the undigestible pieces that they're not able to move through the digestive tract, is what we call the pellet. So how does the pellet form? Well, and you'll see there's a visual here of the owl swallowing the mouse hole. Before an owl pellet can start, the owl has to catch its prey. Owls are carnivores, so they eat a wide variety of animals, including birds, moles, an organism that's not listed here but called a vole, so similar to mole, but it starts with a V, mice, rabbits, skunks, frogs, insects, and so much more. Since they do not have teeth, they cannot chew their food, so therefore they must swallow it whole in large chunks. After the owl's meal, the food travels down its esophagus and then enters through into the gizzard and the other stomachs. Once there, that is where the meal is separated into two parts, the digestible and the undigestible pieces. The digestible materials pass through the owl's digestive tract, while those items that are not digestible form into a pellet and then are regurgitated or vomited back up by the owl. After the gizzard has formed into the pellet, it then pushes the pellet back up through that digestive tract, through that esophagus. It's stored there for several hours, but before an owl can eat another meal, it must regurgitate that pellet in order to make room for its next meal. So the final step for the owl is the regurgitation of the pellet. While the owl is regurgitating the pellet, it looks like it's having difficulty breathing. Once the pellet is ejected, the owl settles back down into a comfortable position. So why are these pellets important? Well, pellets are perfect to illustrate the nature of the food chain and to demonstrate the role of predators in our ecosystem. Owl pellets are a natural educational tool that show us the skeletal anatomy and the identification of prey. Each of them are unique in size, shape, and in content. Now, when you go to do your owl pellet dissection, you're going to see the owl, as well as you're going to see the pellet, and that's that piece here. Now, off to the side, you're going to see, this is a mouse. The skeletal remains outlined on the mouse. Few options here. If you'd like, you can turn the labels on because there is sound, so once you pull the pellet apart, you'll be able to listen to the name of the bones, and so if that would make it easier for you to complete the skeletal outline of the mouse, you can do that. We can keep those labels off. There's also a bone chart, so this came on as fun facts. If I click this, it'll show me a bone chart, and here's another place where I can kind of line up those bones so that I know that I have them. Now, in order to start my dissection, I'm going to take my mouse and actually click on the pellet. And as I do that, it will start to allow the bones to be seen. Now, I can go in and I'm going to click and drag, and as I click and drag the bones, the computer's going to name them for me. So if it's helpful to have my labels on, I can do that.
Thoracic vertebra.
Thoracic vertebra. So I can go and kind of label that. Now, if I try to take a bone and put it in an incorrect place, it's just going to pull it back into the pile. So if you're not sure, this can be kind of a guess and check for you. You can do it that way as well. So go ahead, take some time. You can pull these
lower jaw.
You can pull these different bones out and apart, matching them.
Lower jaw.
There's my lower jaw. Go ahead, play around with this virtual dissection. See if you can build this entire skeleton. You'll notice, if you want, you could time yourself, so you could do this more than once and see how long it takes. So I'm going to pause here and allow you to go ahead and visit that virtual owl pellet, remembering that it's going to show us those organisms that the owl eats. Now, in this example, we're going to have a mouse, but in the example that I'm going to show you for our data, you're going to see I have some information that includes vole, which is like a relative of a mole, rats, mice, shrews. So this is not the only organism that the owl eats, but it is a very common organism for them to eat. All right, so go ahead, enjoy. Play around with that and see if you can get that puzzle of that anatomy back together.